Let's move on. A little confusing with all these shares up here. Did you slide down one share so it doesn't look kind of funny?
Okay. Just slide down.
Again?
Hello, can you hear me? Is this on? Yes. Hello, everybody. I hope you all have had a great morning and a mid-afternoon of learning. And there's a lot more of that to come, including this session. So we have a lot to cover, and I would like to start us off very quickly. Briefly, my name is Sylvia Maigret. I am a member of the conference committee and the SID board. I'm also the president and CEO of ACDI-VOCA and a proud founding member of the Coalition for Racial and Ethnic Equity and Development, CREED. Welcome, everybody. In this session, we are really excited to learn about USAID's new geospatial strategy and all the significant impacts it's making across our work in several different sectors. It's fascinating stuff, and I'm really excited to see and listen to all that you have to say. So let's get started. I'd like to invite up to the podium USAID Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator of Inclusive Growth Partnerships and Innovation Bureau. Sorry, I had to read that. I couldn't memorize it. Cheryl Stumbras is up here to take over. So thank you, everybody.
Afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. And Sylvia, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. It is so exciting to have you here really to celebrate, because we really are celebrating. We are launching USAID's first ever geospatial strategy. And to say we're a little excited about it is quite an understatement, to be honest with you. But as Sylvia said, here in Washington, I have the privilege of running the Bureau for Inclusive Growth, Partnerships and Innovation, otherwise known as IPI. But I am a senior foreign service officer, so I've spent the vast majority of my years and years of experience with USAID in our overseas missions. And I can tell you from my own experience, I've never had an office that didn't have a map on every single wall in that office. We use location data. It's so critical for every single decision we make about our programs around the world. And also, it is evolving so quickly. I think all digital, but particularly geospatial technology, is really rapidly evolving. Today, we can use it in so many different and new ways than we did in the past. We look at it to look at poverty, pockets of poverty where we are. We look at it to track information on people's location for our programs. We look at it to figure out where our future interventions are going to be. None of that technology actually was available when I joined the Foreign Service. So the invaluable insights that we are gaining from this technology really is opening up opportunities to have greater impact in all the countries that we work in. We can now harness satellite technology to see where deforestation is happening in the Amazon, disarm legacy landmines in the Caucasus, and help farmers secure land rights in Africa. Geospatial data and technology has been at the core of our work to track COVID-19 cases within countries, to understand the drivers of migration, and to help countries respond to climate change through our SID-US project with NASA, as well as FuseNet, our famine and early warning system. We also know from USAID's perspective, multiple bureaus and missions and offices have used different technology and have used it independently to have geospatial capabilities and data sets. And we know that the value of all those capabilities has been invaluable. But as the advancements continue with technology, including machine learning and AI, This geospatial strategy sets out capabilities and standards when we want to collectively invest and incorporate our investments so we can all make collective better decisions. This means that the work of our growing internal geospatial team is just getting bigger and bigger. And I'm sure that's true with all of the implementing partners here today. We all play a more critical role in applying a geographic approach to our development programs. So we really see this strategy as a call to action, right? It's super important for us. We have to work more effectively to target our work, particularly in times of decreasing budgets. We must take advantage of these tools that help us understand where needs are concentrated, where our development programs should be implemented, and the effectiveness of our work by geographic location. I also know personally that launching a strategy is no easy feat, but it is where the most important work begins. Right now, we have to take this vision of the strategy and make it a reality. I'm proud to say that we have a very competent team who's here today to do that. Of course, IPI and USAID GeoCenter's Chief Geographer, Dr. Carrie Stokes, is with us and has been leading our work in this probably for longer than we want to admit. No, okay. That's
Stop
how
counting,
I
it's
feel
higher
too.
math.
No counting from this crew. But she's an extraordinary champion and she leads this great team who is really at the core of everything we do in the geospatial framework. So they will get more into the strategy, obviously, the details of it, and Carrie will introduce the panel. But I just mostly want to express my gratitude for developing the strategy, launching the strategy, and really hitting one more first for USAID. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's been wonderful to have your leadership along this journey of launching a strategy, which I won't go into the details of here because we're here to celebrate the fact that it has actually come to fruition and it is in the public domain. And I want to encourage everybody to take an opportunity to read it when you can. But for now, I want to just give you a little bit of a highlight. So again, I'm Carrie Stokes, and I am the Chief Geographer for USAID and the Director of our GeoCenter. The GeoCenter is a team of geographers and data analysts with remote sensing and mapping expertise. And we work directly with colleagues in our bureaus in the Washington headquarters of USAID, just down the street, as well as our overseas missions. And what we're trying to do is we're not just using technology for technology's sake, because it is kind of flashy and cool sometimes when you can look at satellite imagery, but we're trying to generate real insights that can inform the many kinds of decisions that USAID is making, both in Washington and in the field, and the many levels of decision-making that are occurring. So we are drawing upon these amazing advancements that are happening in geospatial technology, digital data, visualization techniques, and of course, accessing satellite imagery today, which was only a dream for me, just 15 years ago. My nephew, who is quite young, has access to his parents' cell phone, and he can see high resolution imagery on the maps these days that everybody now is so dependent upon. We almost can't remember a time in our lives where there wasn't a phone talking to us to tell us how to get to where we were going. But the imagery he sees was classified when I got into this business of the geospatial industry years ago. So it's a very exciting time in terms of technology. But what's most really important is how do we turn that fire hose of data that's coming at us these days in digital form and all these technologies and make it relevant to USAID and the kind of work that we do, because not everything actually is relevant. Sometimes it's a distraction and it's flashy, but it may not necessarily relate directly to what we're doing. So that's the whole point of the geospatial strategy. So let's see if I can make this go to the next slide. So let's just jump right in. Raise your hand if you had heard of the strategy board or if you've even seen it online. Okay, that's a good third of the room. Raise your hand if you've seen a printed copy of it. Okay, one person, that's right. Because we didn't print any because we're in the digital world. We printed about 5, and I do have one here that is in my backpack that I'm happy to show you. But really, it's probably easier to peruse it online. But it's really trying to help us as an agency not just focus on location-based information, but our bigger vision for this is that a geographic approach empowers our agency and all of our partners, which includes you in this room, to more effectively apply all forms of data to our international development and humanitarian assistance outcomes. So let me just remind you what I'm talking about when I say this geographic approach. Who's heard of the geographic approach before today? Okay, a few. Well, actually, you all did because Cheryl just mentioned it, but that's okay. I won't test you on it. I'm going to give you the answer to the test right here. So this approach, it's a process, and it involves bringing together both data and people who have the expertise to analyze where needs are concentrated within the boundaries of a country. I want to remind people about how we operate at USAID. Our budgets come to us usually at the country level, sometimes at the regional level. But when we're talking about really making a difference in communities and people's lives day to day, we really have to zoom in to the neighborhood level, to the household level sometimes. So understanding where the needs are concentrated is critical. And then we need to compare that. Where are we already working? Sometimes those line up, but they may not, and we need to know why. And of course, we also need to be able to track the effectiveness of the programs that we're implementing by geographic location. One project might be implemented in multiple locations, and is it more effective in one place as compared to another? And if so, why? So let me just give you a highlight of the strategy itself. We have 4 strategic objectives. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the term strategic objective. Everybody, okay, SO for short, because we make an acronym for everything, in the government. So, okay, the first strategic objective it's mostly internal, really. It's to ensure that we are increasing access to data, to geospatial data and the right tools for our own workforce. Sometimes I look at my nephew and I think he has access to sectors in which we work and the priorities that we've already committed to as an agency. And then the key piece of this is the people in the room. In this room, we have the food security specialists, the climate change specialists, we have the health specialists, we have the gender specialists, we have all the different expertise that is represented in our India mission. And that's what's so critical here. Because as the data analysts, we're not trying to tell our colleagues what to do. We're trying to show them what the data is saying, and they can tell us the why. We can show them correlations between indicators in the environment sector and the health sector, but they are the ones who really know the country better than we do, and they are the ones who can better understand, the reasons behind why we might be seeing these relationships. So this was one of those particular geofocusing workshops that generated an immense amount of conversation that had not occurred before we got there to do this geofocusing in collaboration with them. So let's take a look at one of the maps from India. This was very recent. This was just made a couple months ago. So we all know we're focused on climate change. It's kind of the hottest topic out there right now besides AI. And this particular map was made for a purpose. Our GIS specialist, Uma, who is a local hire in the mission, created this map. And I'm going to walk you through what you're seeing because I know it's kind of hard to see that screen with the lights on right now. I feel like we should dim the lights and bring out the popcorn. So you're looking at a map that is showing heat waves from over a 50-year period from 1969 to 2019. Now, what is a heat wave day? Okay, now where's the popcorn? A heat wave day is defined as in the plains parts of the lower parts of the country, 104 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, or in the mountainous region, 86 degrees or hotter. So the darker areas that you see on the map are the places that experienced more heat wave days in that 50-year period. And the lighter colors are the ones that experience fewer heat wave days in that same period. So why does this even matter? Well, the mission is trying to decide where to locate our Asia Resilient Cities program in the country. And this program is specifically designed to help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. So this map is part of that decision-making process. Now we're going to go from India to East Africa. So this is another example of how a long time effort, in fact, it wasn't a map, it was about 60 different maps and visualizations that we made through 15 plus data sets, a lot of data crunching here. But the whole concept here is to be able to visualize a lot of information in an intuitive way that when you look at it, it looks easy. People behind the scenes know it wasn't so easy to get to that point, but the whole idea is to be able to help people make the difficult decisions that are happening across SID all the time. So what you're looking at here is, again, it's a time series. It's more of an animation from the year 2000 to the year 2020. So over a 20-year period, focus your attention on the red circled area that I have. That's the Lake Victoria area of East Africa, an economic hub for the region. The darker the color means the higher the population density. So you can see, you don't have to be a remote sensing specialist or PhD in geography to know there were more people after that 20-year period than at the beginning of it. So why does that even matter? Because as we're designing our long-term strategies and our presence in the region and in the country itself and in the Kenya country, which is where we're working in Nairobi to both do the regional analysis and the bilateral analysis, we need to know where the people are. It doesn't make sense for us to put programs in places where there aren't any people. So this was an easy visualization that really drove home what was so critical. And for those of you who have ever worked in East Africa or in Kenya in particular, you may already know this particular statistic, but it's pretty sobering. In the country of Kenya, 80% of the population is 35 or younger. So why does that matter for a strategy? For not the geospatial strategy, but for the CDCS, if you've ever heard that acronym. Yeah, it's a strategic plan for the mission, because we need to know the demographics of the country as we're planning our development objectives, our strategic objectives. If 80% of the population is 35 or younger, nothing we do in any sector is going to matter unless we are involving that segment of the population. So this, not just this one visualization, but the many maps that we created, we were able to map where were people concentrated in that age group across the country. And that resulted in an entirely new development objective focused on youth engagement. All right, let's go. Still in East Africa. Now we're going to go a little bit north here to Ethiopia. As many of you know, malaria is one of the biggest killers of children under 5 in sub-Saharan Africa, and we have a malaria prevention program in Ethiopia. This particular map was made by the GIS specialist who's based in the Ethiopian mission. And again, going with the same cartographic tricks we use, the darker the color usually means more of something. So focus in on the darker colors there, and that's really highlighting where more malaria cases had been detected within the districts in the country. So that was really helpful information because having that then helped our health office in the mission target where they needed to focus their efforts. When you can see there is malaria occurring all over the country, where do we need to focus our energy first? Now we're going to move from Africa into this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere. So everybody's heard, of course, about the migration challenge that is hitting us in our southern border here in this country. And one of the long-term projects that my team has been involved with is what we call migration mapping. We collect information from CBP, which is the Customs and Border Protection. They collect information about where people are originating. They hand that data over to us. We spend a long time cleaning that data because it is in a lot of different languages. You know, places are not spelled the same. There's a lot of effort behind it. But once we clean it up, we visualize it on a map, many maps, and it gives us a sense. Knowing where people are coming from helps us better understand the drivers of migration. Why are people leaving? You don't always know the exact reason when you see, but it gives you more information. So looking at this over time is super helpful. So what we're seeing here in this particular map is showing what's been going on in what we call the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And it's showing the number of Guatemalans that were encountered by CBP, where they originated from. And this particular map, you can see the darker areas in the Western Highlands, kind of to your, it's kind of the Northwest. But that's not the only place they're coming from. They're coming from all over the region. And in Honduras in particular, this, among many, many maps we've made since 2014 with this data, has helped USAID specifically target 40 different municipalities in the country of Honduras, where 60% of irregular migration originates. All right, now I'm going to get to some really fun, cool stuff because my nephews love the satellite imagery. So what we can see from space these days is absolutely amazing. It's no longer the purview of our Department of Defense. We have civilian uses for it. And so if you remember a few years ago when the situation in Venezuela was degrading pretty quickly, people were fleeing next door to the country of Colombia. So this particular imagery helped us locate refugee settlements. And this is important to understand if we're trying to respond with humanitarian assistance. It seems easy when you're looking at this, but when you don't actually know where to look, you have to collaborate with corroborate information on the ground where you hear people talking, and then we have to task the satellites to actually focus in certain places of the Earth to be able to find, sometimes it's like a needle in a haystack, but this is an example of how we've used satellite imagery. All right, so on the theme of imagery and how we've used it, this is a program we're quite excited about. It's called Youth Mappers. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Youth Mappers before. Is anybody in the room? Ooh, I like to see that. Great. Okay. So this is a program to empower young people at the university level age with digital mapping and leadership skills. And they learn to do mapping on a platform called OpenStreetMap, OSM. It's free and open, and it's web-based. And the platform has high-resolution satellite imagery as the backdrop. And we work with the students to help them understand how to do the mapping. It's basic tracing. So for those of us in the room who remember in the analog days of coloring books and maybe putting something against the window and tracing over another darker line, it's the same thing, which is doing it digitally. And it's creating data that's going to actually be used again. So we direct the students about what areas of the ground to map. We know that data will then be used by our own projects at USAID as well as for humanitarian response. And we started with 3 universities. Now we have 400 across 77 countries. And we've made more than 20 million edits to this OpenStreetMap platform. Just think about lots of features on the ground have now been mapped all around the world at a level of great granularity by people who know those communities. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do we need to do that? We have Google Maps or we have Apple Maps. But That's in this country. In the places where USAID works, they're very undermapped. And if they are maps, they're still in paper form, and it might be the Defense Department that has them. So that doesn't mean it's being shared necessarily. So what's going on with this, we call wiki map of the world, is it's really kind of democratizing data. And it's allowing people to define their own world by mapping it. So what you're seeing here is photographs of the students in the lab mapping with their laptops on the platform. And then on the far right, you're seeing students in what we call in the field. They're going out to verify that what we mapped in the lab was correct information. All right. So I'll give you one example of how some of this data has been used for development purposes. Yes, we're happy to invest in students and their capacity, but we also make sure they're creating data that can be used. So this is just one example, going back to the issue of malaria. So the students in this case mapped places in sub-Saharan Africa that we delineated in advance where we had no data, no roads information, no building information. And as part of our malaria prevention efforts, we invest in spraying insecticide in people's homes because that's to kill the mosquitoes, which carry the malaria. But it's an expensive campaign to send people out to the field to do this. And it's really critical that before you go, you need to know where you're going and how to get there. And you need to know how much insecticide to have. Because if you don't get at least 80% of the area in question, the whole integrity of the campaign is compromised and will not be effective. So having maps in advance and knowing how many homes will be targeted helps calculate the amount of insecticide before the technicians go out to spray. So I'm usually very hesitant as an analyst behind the scenes to say data saves lives because I think that's a little bit of a stretch sometimes, but I can tell you with great confidence in this case, it is definitely true. And we've heard that from our implementing partners who have actually used this kind of data because they have come back with their metrics to say, yes, we were able to hit more than 80% of the area in question. So that was a very quick overview about the geospatial strategy, why we see geospatial information as being so critical to the work of our agency. And what I'd like to do now is direct your attention to this very esteemed panel that we have here in front of you. All right. So right to my left, or that makes no sense, doesn't the person to my left, Kyle Alden, has a background in geospatial analysis and food security. And he is going to be talking to us about the work that he has been doing in his bureau, the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, REFS. Our bureaus change names like almost every other month, so I have to think twice about the names of our bureaus. So I can imagine it's hard for people who aren't actually in the front of like a building. And then next to Kyle, we have Dr. Rachel Lucas, and she is in the Bureau for Global Health, and we'll be talking about why data is so critically important for the health sector and the work that happens in her bureau. And then next to Rachel is Nina Feldman, who is a geospatial analyst and has been working for the last 5 years in humanitarian assistance. So without further ado, I would like to ask Kyle to come up, and I want you to know the question that I've asked each of them to speak for a few minutes about. I've asked them to talk about why they think the geospatial strategy and geospatial information in general is important for their sector. Right, over to you, Kyle.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for having me. So as Carrie mentioned, I'm the geospatial specialist within the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. And I really want to highlight two linkages between the strategy that Carrie just discussed and the work that we're doing in my bureau around data and systems improvements that we're going to hopefully see through the strategy, and around improvements to policies that we'll hopefully see through the strategy. So when we're talking about data and systems, I think that the strategy and how it's been laid out and the work that we're going to do over the next 5 years is going to really enable us to do a lot more and a lot more capable storing, managing, visualizing, and assessing of spatial data, which I really think is going to help improve our programming and our planning broadly. So for the example that I have today is within the Feed the Future initiative, which is the US government's global food security initiative, each of our 20 target countries is required to select a zone of influence. These zones of influence are where we ask the interagency at post in each country to concentrate resources, and where we're going to measure progress over time. And these zones of influence are really key to our monitoring, evaluation, and learning framework. Within the global food security strategy, we say that we're going to aim to reduce poverty and stunting by 20% in these areas where we work. And so when thinking about this framework, we need high quality or access to high quality spatial subnational data to select the areas, to monitor them, to evaluate, and to learn from what we're doing. So when I'm thinking about selecting the areas, we ask them to look at some data around level of need, around poverty, hunger, malnutrition. We ask them to look for data around agricultural opportunities, among a host of other data sets. The great thing is that Carrie's mentioned that there's been this sort of explosion in data over the last decade or the last years, and this data is all out there. But for non-geospatial practitioners, it's often hard to find and synthesize and work together. And I'm really hopeful that our geospatial enterprise architecture or infrastructure that we talk about in the strategy is going to enable us to get access to this data to folks in the field in a lot more streamlined ways. Also, in addition, beyond selection, when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, Carrie mentioned satellite data. We have these opportunities, especially in environment and food security, where we have this really high frequency data that we can be using to monitor what's happening in our zones of influence in a lot more thoughtful and useful way than we do now. So I'm really hopeful that this strategy is going to get us there on that front. Moving to the other major linkage that I have is around these policies and integrating our policies a little bit better. And right now, it's a little bit difficult for our implementing partners and even folks at USAID to know what's required to be reported in terms of where your activities are located and how you should report it and where it should go. And so one of the things that we talk about in the strategy is doing a better job of making those policies really clear and standardizing that across the agency. For example, with Feed the Future, there are over 400 different activities every single year that we're funding. Most of them report into a central repository about where they're working, but not all of them. So anytime that I am asked, where are we working in Kenya, I can go to our central repository, get most of the data, but then I have to go through this really broad array of progress reports, planning documents, evaluations to really try to figure that out. It's all in different formats. And I'm really hoping in the next couple of years with this strategy, we'll be able to centralize that and manage it a lot better and also share it with the public a lot better. So you guys and our partners can know where we're working and can suggest collaboration opportunities going forward. So those are the two major linkages that I'm really excited about with the strategy. I'm going to pass over to Rachel.
Great, thanks so much. It is not lost on me that I am the only non-geospatial specialist on this panel, but I am in the business of hopefully strengthening data use practices in global health across the health sector. And I wanted to offer a few reflections on what the strategy means to us from the global health perspective. And reinforcing some of the points already raised by Kyle and Carrie. First, the strategy not only formalizes the use of geospatial information and tools, as we've heard, as key elements to USAID's development lifecycle, but it also lowers the barrier to entry for other development programs. The strategy lays out a framework for us for how global health can fully integrate the design and implementation processes for all health programs and leverage existing health program assets into new implementation zones and technical areas. And so by way of example, our two key presidential initiatives in global health, PEPFAR and PMI, the HIV and the malaria initiatives, have long recognized the importance of geographic information for their programs and have invested heavily in data systems and tools and in human resources to support the collection, management, and use of such information. In the case of PEPFAR, the initiative has also supported partner countries to develop and to maintain health facilities registries, used as master lists to identify ideal facilities and communities to target HIV health-related services. So having this detailed information on where USAID or the interagency, these initiatives are working down to the district level in the case of PMI, or down to the site level in the case of PEPFAR, as well as understanding what services and technical assistance are being provided at those sites, has helped inform in Global Health Beyond these two initiatives, the design and implementation of both routine development programs, and enabled us to respond more swiftly to new emergencies and initiatives, most recently COVID, the COVID response. So really understanding how to get to the last mile, how to get oxygen tanks where they need to be, get needles into arms, et cetera. So within the health sector broadly, we know that USAID missions and partners have begun using geospatial analytics for disease surveillance, or have been for a while, for surveillance, for targeting specific interventions, as mentioned earlier, monitoring health trends and program performance, and informing resource allocation. But the strategy is also a huge leap forward for us in helping us to conceptualize and systematize the ways to combine data from different sectors, such as environment and health. So on that note, oh, I've given away, I was going to lead you to this, but okay. So as many of you know, and you've heard of the Black Death or the bubonic plague, which wiped out a third of the European population in the 1300s. But what people don't know is that the plague still is active in many countries, including the US, where we have annually cases in the New Mexico and Southwest region of the country. Madagascar, surprisingly, is the country with the highest number of annual cases of the plague. And it's, as you can see from this graph, Madagascar has experienced several outbreaks since the plague arrived on ships from India around 1900. In Madagascar, the plague outbreaks happen every year, primarily in rural areas, with cases likely caused by deforestation, burning forests for agriculture, causing rats to flee from forests and into villages and infecting people. But the latest and the last major outbreak in Madagascar occurred in 2017, when the bacteria, which is normally transmitted by fleas, shifted to its pneumonic form, where it spread person to person by coughing. And thus the pneumonic plague epidemic spread in urban centers, and there were over 400 cases of the plague that eventually resulted in more than 200 deaths in a very short period of time, in just a matter of a couple of months, overwhelming the health system there. So what made the 2017 outbreak different was the unusual size, the rate of transmission, the pneumonic spread, the coughing, and the multiple geographic foci, which you can see here on the map, primarily focused in urban centers. So unlike in the past where transmission was in the rural areas, the 2017 epidemic was really in urban centers. So like several well-known pathogens, we had a case where environmental tragedy probably led to cause of human tragedy at a great cost. And as an agency, we decided to do something about this. So literally in 2019, literally a week before the first official COVID cases were confirmed, USAID launched a call for proposals for the HEARTH program, which you can see what it spells out to here. And it was a call for proposals for partnerships with private companies to jointly advance two objectives. First, the sustainable conservation of biodiverse landscapes, and second, the well-being and prosperity of local communities. And after the call for proposals in Madagascar, a public-private alliance was formed called the CIRO, and the focus of it was to work with local Madagascar cocoa and vanilla farmers to use cocoa agroforestry practices to help restore forest corridors for lemurs, while also providing better income for farmers. So here is the punchline. The punchline is here. So as part of the routine program monitoring, the Alliance uses satellite imagery, as well as other geospatial data to track patterns of deforestation, reforestation, combines that with epi data, and community data to track factors that may affect the health of surrounding communities, including including the annual outbreaks of the plague. And in the aftermath of COVID, in the aftermath of the great 2017 plague, with climate change also affecting Madagascar, including with multiple strong cyclones over the past couple of years, the interaction of health and environment is a growing priority for the Madagascar government. And so geospatial analyses that quantify the vulnerability and resiliency of communities and measures the effects of health outcomes will be needed to inform policy making in an ongoing way. Thank you.
Right, I'll be quick so we can get to questions. Hi, everybody. They want to say thank you for letting me join you today. Thank you, Carrie, for inviting me to talk to you all on today's panel. So as Carrie mentioned, prior to joining USAID's GeoCenter, located within the Innovation Technology and Research Hub, I spent 5 years using GIS to support USAID's humanitarian assistance efforts, specifically in the Asia regional portfolio. During that time, I also co-founded and ran the Data Analysis and Visualization Community of Practice, which worked to bring together data users and data creators to showcase information, share data, and promote data initiatives for decision-making. So I'm excited to be here today and talk to you all about my two big passions, which is geospatial data and humanitarian efforts, which the geospatial strategy weaves together these two concepts seamlessly. Okay. So using geographic data, the decisions we make will be rooted in evidence and efficiency. The strategy will also strengthen USAID's ability to collect and harness geospatial information in collaboration with the communities that we provide humanitarian assistance. And there's two experiences that I just want to talk to you all about that kind of use and embody this strategy and what it outlines. The first is an open source community mapping program that I started and implemented alongside partners from the Pan American Development Foundation. Together, we established a 5-day workshop using open source GIS technology to facilitate community-based flood risk reduction in 2 cities in Belize, San Ignacio and Santa Elena. The project included conducting local business assessment surveys, briefing city officials, and coordinating with educators and community leaders. And at the center of each of these conversations was a map. Using the data we collected and a map of the cities, we were able to display new data that reflected local knowledge and context, highlight areas of risk and flooding, and share these data building skills with the community. The second example is a story map that I made that showcases how USAID and its partners are helping to build multi-hazard disaster resilience and save lives in the most disaster-prone country in the region in the world, the East Asia Pacific. Geospatial data is the foundation of this story. It visualizes where disasters took place and connects the audience to on-the-ground insights about how our partners are strengthening capabilities, enhancing early warning systems, and boosting community preparedness. Having such a strong and concise front-facing product gave the EAP, or East Asia Pacific, and our partners the recognition that they deserve, as well as the support they need. The geospatial strategy efforts will continue to build the geospatial infrastructure, and with that, make more of these products and more of these projects possible. So, thank you.
Okay, that's been a whirlwind of stories and examples just from 3 critical areas, sectors in which USAID works. We could go on, but I want to hand over the next few minutes to you all to have a chance to ask some questions, thanking each one of our panelists for the examples that they've given and the stories that they have shared. And ooh, the lights are going down again. I think the music's going to come out and the popcorn's going to come out and we're going to start getting mappy. So yeah, let me, if I can see you, maybe just scream a region of the world and we'll bring the microphone to you. But we just want to open it up to some questions. Anything about the geospatial strategy or any of the topics that you heard the panel ask, or if you just want to do a geography spelling or geography B, I'll do my best.
Thank you very much. Panelists, Andrew Chambade from USAID's Act to End NTDs East program implemented by RTI. From my experience, I worked with the Uganda mission from the health on the health team for 21 years. So I can relate a lot to what Dr. Rachel said. I know there's been a deliberate effort by both PEPFAR and PMI and TB to get into the health systems and be able to use that. I didn't get that sense from the humanitarian side and the food security side. I am just curious, are you using the government health systems? And two, are you using systems that are interoperable with the government system so that in the event that you are out of that space, they can be able to mine the data and use that data to make their own decisions? I know PEPFAR, PMI is using a lot of that data to make decisions, but I'm just out of curiosity from the other two sectors. Thank you.
Kyle, you want to just take it from there? Or, yeah.
So from the food security perspective, the data that we collect, so we do population-based surveys in those zones of influence that I mentioned, that data that we collect is ends up being publicly available and coordinated with the government as we release those survey results. Other than that, though, the data that we're generally working with is already open source and already broadly available, with the exception, I think, sometimes of our activity location data, the second thing that I mentioned. And that's, I think, a growth area for us to do a better job sharing with. We do, to the extent possible with our folks in each mission, try to coordinate with the government about how data sharing should work. But it's a patchwork of systems. And so, it's, I think, definitely a growth area as well.
Nina, do you have anything you would like to share with regards to how today the name is the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, but I know when you started, it was called the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, to that particular question about sharing data or collaborating with the governments in the country?
Yeah, I think almost all of the data that we use is open source because we tend to pull from what data we have available. I'm trying to think of what else. But yeah, we work with our information officers and then with our NGOs to provide any data that we can. Usually we have like specific NGOs or like data sites that we go to pull from. But all of it is open source, so would be available.
And to just kind of jump off what Nina said, so this term open source, you've heard me say it a couple of times. Maybe every one of us at some point has said this, but this is a thing that didn't exist when I first got into the world of GIS and geography and geospatial technology. But we're in an era today where we can share information instantly. I'm not even going to go into talking about social media because we'd be here for 3 days on that topic, but data gets shared instantly now. And much of it is being created. It's from the crowd, from us, from citizens, from people. And it's a whole new era to try and make sense of it, collect it, manage it, curate it, make sure it's actually valid. Sometimes it's, not correct information. And so because USAID is not a mapping agency, we're a development agency, we don't have a big data acquisition budget. That's probably no surprise to anyone in this room, but I work a lot in the interagency with my colleagues at USGS and NOAA and NASA and beyond. And that's what they do. That is where their money goes. So I remind them, we use the data that they collect with their investments, and we also do it the best we can with open source information that we trust. We don't want to be making decisions about data that's not verified, but we use open source a lot. And especially in the situation where you're responding so quickly to a disaster, time is of the essence. You use the data that you can use. And I can't speak to how in the past that information may have been shared, but one of the main purposes of this geospatial strategy is to ensure that the data that we are using is also able to be shared back with the very people that in the places that the data covers. And we haven't had that capability from an IT perspective in the past. Yes, in the far back, yes.
Yeah, my voice carries. It's probably RTI International as well. So thank you very much for this great presentation. It was fascinating. The applications of this data and analysis to health and agriculture and climate change are all really clear. I work in governance, and I'm curious to hear if you're receiving requests from the DRG teams and missions for this sort of analysis, and if so, what kinds of requests? Thank you.
Yes, we are. So the geographic information and the kinds of analyses that we're doing covers what we call human geography. So economic information, social statistics, demographic information. We're used to seeing that many times in a census. and of course the physical geography that everybody has, traditionally thinks of. But we also work with our DRG colleagues. Yes, many times. I've got so many examples I could go into, but it's interesting how you can take human geographic information and put it on a map. So what do I exactly mean by that? So, for example, we have a GI specialist in the country of Georgia, or in the mission there, and she's gotten very creative. As one would imagine, if you didn't even know anything about USAID's portfolio in Georgia, you could just kind of make a guess that's an ex-Soviet bloc nation from the era of yesteryear, and many of our programs are focused on democracy, rights, and governance in that part of the world. And so our specialist there was interested in mapping the number of females who had participated in the electoral process over a period of about 5 years. And so she was able to get the data, and she mapped beginning in 2017 and 5 years forward. And it was absolutely fascinating to see how that was shifting. But it was at the time, and I haven't looked at it, in the last couple of years, it was increasing. And it happened this is at the local level, the municipal level. And it happened to coincide with another survey that had been conducted. She didn't conduct it, but it was done by somebody else, probably one of you partners, about what the perception was of the population. And it turns out that more of the population were to see more women running for local elections or local positions. That's absolutely fascinating. And that's not something traditionally, when you think of GIS, you would think to put on a map. But it was very illuminating for the mission to be able to see this and to kind of target some of their DRG programs. Yes, I see one right here.
Hi, my name is Meeti, and I work with the International Development Group on one of the education initiatives that USAID has funded. And there is definitely no debate that the work that you're doing is extremely relevant across multiple sectors. And, I have like a list of questions that we could answer using the data or the visualizations that you're able to create. So I'm really curious to know that, is there an existing strategy or an upcoming, like in the horizon, of partnering with the private sector to leverage the tech leverage the data that they are collecting and using it for USAID's purposes? Because I feel like that can open even more avenues and also help us make strides much faster. So just curious about that.
Excellent question. Yes. Okay. So I didn't have the moment to go into the specifics, but yes. So at the GeoCenter and beyond, even my team, we actively engage with the private sector. We actively engage with what I call a larger geospatial community: private sector, others in the interagency, academia, nonprofits, our partners. But in the private sector in particular, what we have also seen, one of the reasons why we all have imagery on our phones is because there is now a huge commercial sector in satellite data assets that did not exist in the early days. And so we interact with many of those companies. Since the strategy has come out, many have contacted us to say, how can we help you? We want to get involved. We want to be able to make sure that our work is making a positive difference in the world, which is great. And we're looking for creative ways to collaborate. But I always have to remind them, going back, well, I still don't have a data acquisition budget and I'd love to be able to buy, but there are programs to be able to share their data. And one thing I do want to let everybody know about in this room, if you don't know about it, it's kind of word of mouth. One of the services we provide in the GeoCenter is cost-free access to high resolution satellite imagery, unclassified, through the sharing that our partners, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, another government agency, has. So there's a portal, and we will, if there's an implementing partner from USAID that needs access to this specific scenes of the earth for the work that they're doing, you can get access to it cost-free, even if it wasn't part of your original proposal that was funded by USAID. And that has been a pretty fascinating program in the number of years we've been doing it. And to date, I think we've got about the size of the earth of 2 Alaskas. That's pretty big. I don't know if anybody's ever flown over Alaska or been to Alaska. It's a big state. So we have provided imagery that would cover that much of the earth if we were to kind of stitch it all together. But more importantly, what does it really mean in terms of cost savings, meaning two different parts of the government paying for the same imagery? We have saved USAID over $80 million by doing it this way. So sharing between government agencies to be able to get access to high resolution imagery as one example. So yeah, we're continuing to talk because we can't do this alone. And it's kind of a geography brings us all together. So yeah. One more question in the back, and then I want to make sure people have time to get to the last plenary session. Yes. Yep.
I promise this was not planned, but my name is Rebecca Juden. I'm a Merlot advisor at RTI. That's what I had to put that disclaimer. So I also have a strong background in GIS, and reading the strategy was I was very excited about it.
And she read it.
Yes. I've been
Get two
working in
goals up.
GIS since 2012 and have done everything from health to disaster risk management, education. From the Merlot perspective and reading the strategy, is there another initiative for USAID to create metrics and or indicators focusing on measuring the impact of the strategy? And to what extent, if those are in the works, to what extent will these become official standard indicators incorporated across our different sectors?
Oh, another awesome question. You guys are awesome. Okay, I'm going to answer your two ways. So first is we are in the midst of developing the implementation plan. After every strategy comes the next step, which is now write how the heck you're going to do this thing. So we're in the midst of that, and we will have metrics for measuring, are we meeting our objectives for the strategy? So that's the short answer. The longer answer is we already have something in our ADS. For those of you who, can't sleep at night and you want to just try to sleep at night, maybe try and read USAID's ADS, automatic directive system. It's really the guidance rules for how we operate, frankly, internally. And we have an internal requirement, ADS 529 and ADS 201. These are specific to how we ask ourselves to operate. And each 529 is a requirement for us as USAID, and then this needs to transfer also to our partners to collect activity location data. So every time we're implementing programs, we're supposed to be collecting where that has occurred. In addition, ADS 201 is specifically focused on collecting indicator data disaggregated by location. So what do I mean by that? Currently, the practice has, or in the past, the practice had been you collect your indicators, how well are your programs performing based on a set of indicators that get determined once the award is made. But in the past, it hasn't necessarily been collected by a location, by a particular geographic place. And unless we collect that information that way, there's no way for us to really get a bigger picture understanding about how well are the programs performing in the place that they're being implemented. So that requirement or that expectation is already in place right now, and it was in place before we put the strategy. If I had a magic wand, I would have done things in a different chronological order, but opportunities don't always come about that way. But so the strategy does mention these two ADS requirements. It is already there, and we welcome your thoughts and your input about how to do this. It's not like a recipe when you're baking a cake. It's not that prescriptive on purpose, because the range of projects and programs that we invest in at USAID are so broad that it doesn't make sense. It's not one size fits all. So if we were to say something, thou shalt, collect every water pump in Africa with a GPS coordinate that long, that does not make sense for a training that happens in Indonesia on how to do the rule of law. So it's very general guidance, but we are here to help in how to make sense of a particular program or scope of work to ensure that it's meeting the spirit of this intention so that we can all do better development at the end. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We all have to run to the plenary session because it's starting right now, and I'm sorry for having us go over by a minute. Thanks again.